Hey everybody, this is Chris with the Ancient Scholar. Hope this video finds you doing well. I'm going to do a short little follow-on video to the mechanisms behind or that underpin ST elevation or ST segment elevation in the setting of ischemia and injury, or at least the mechanisms as we know and understand them. And I just wanted to provide some additional context to clarify any confusion that may have resulted from my prior video. So really what this has to do with ST elevation specifically, it has to do with the isoelectric line on the ECG, a flat line, right? So when you see a flat line, we often associate that with, oh, there's nothing going on, and that's not really the case, right? You've got sodium potassium pumps working to maintain electrochemical gradients. And so there is a gradient that's being maintained, and there are ions that are moving. It's just kind of the net flow of ions are kind of canceling out. And so there's no change in the potential across the membrane of the myocytes. So even though ions may be moving in and out, the potential is unchanging, and the potential at the isoelectric line in the myocytes of the heart tends to be around negative 100, negative 110 millivolts, okay? And then something happens, right? Those cells are stimulated, and that allows sodium to enter the ventricular tissues. At least I'm going to focus on the ventricular tissues because that's like the majority of the mass of the muscle mass of the heart, and eventually get up to a little threshold potential. So enough little sodium leaks in, you get up to the threshold potential of around, what is it, around negative 70 or so millivolts. And then a bunch of fast sodium channels open up, sodium rushes in, the cell depolarizes, and then potassium starts leaving as it repolarizes, okay? So that's kind of what we see. So what happens in, or what we think our best understanding is what happens in ischemic tissue in a transmural myocardial infarction is that there is a lack of ATP, right? The tissue becomes ischemic, oxidative phosphorylation isn't working, right? You're not able to make adequate amounts of ATP, and ATP-dependent mechanisms that are ATP-dependent processes that are going on in these cells begin to shut down essentially. And that one of the things that happens is you have this ATP potassium channel that opens up because there's not ATP present to keep it closed, and potassium is continuing to leak out of the cells into the extracellular environment, all right, the interstitial environment, and you get this localized where the ischemia and injury is occurring. In that area, you get this localized hyperkalemia, and those myocytes, then that kind of pushes, right, that kind of changes the membrane potential and makes those ischemic cells a little more likely, it's easier for them to depolarize, so they depolarize sooner and they repolarize sooner, so they're depolarizing, repolarizing out of sync, and the membrane potential has been altered because we have potassium and hydrogen ions and whatnot leaking out of the cells. And so those cells electrochemically are kind of out of sync with the surrounding healthy tissue, and that creates a voltage differential between the ischemic tissue and the surrounding healthy tissue. And what that creates is a kind of current of ions that are pushing from the ischemic tissue out. And how that's manifested on the ECG is that is going to shift this isoelectric line down. So the monitor is going to interpret that current as shifting the isoelectric line down. So in this ischemic tissue, the isoelectric line is going to be shifted down, and that's going to be the baseline shifted down versus here in normally functioning tissue, okay? And then what happens is you're going to have your depolarization all right? So there's a P and the Q and the R and the S. And then you're going to have repolarization, right? Potassium's going to spew out of the cell. So let me draw that. And everything's going to kind of get reset. And that current is temporarily going to kind of be reset at the normal baseline because the cells have depolarized and they're now repolarizing. And repolarization, of course, is occurring at the ST segment, the T wave. And so what you get is you get kind of this flat line here, a little bit of an isoelectric line, the J point, and the J point then kind of resets back to up here, right, back to where it would normally be, right? And then what happens? You go back into resting potential, and those ischemic tissues are then able to continue providing this current that pushes outwards, and the baseline, the isoelectric line, gets shifted back down, and then you have the depolarization that occurs, burp, 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 and then you reset things during repolarization temporarily at the ST segment, right? And so the baseline, the isoelectric line shifts back up, and that happens at the ST segment, and then you repolarize, and now you have that electrochemical difference between the ischemic and injured tissues that are providing that constant current, and the baseline gets shifted down. So when we look at the heart, right, so let's say that we have a positive electrode for whatever lead here, and then we have a transmural myocardial infarction going through the thickness, the entire thickness of the wall. So these cells here are not able to depolarize and repolarize normally, right? And so they are going, and you're going to have this localized hyperkalemia, and then those cells have a different resting potential and threshold potential than the healthy tissues that are uninvolved, right? And so what happens is in this area here, let's just say it's occurring right here, that current, quote unquote, is pushing out from, and it can't push out in this direction because the entire thickness of the wall, the muscle is involved, right? So the signal can't go out this way. Instead, the signal gets pushed out in this direction and this direction, and that is essentially perpendicular to the positive electrode. And so now you have a signal that is moving either perpendicular or away from the positive electrode. And what does that do? Well, that's going to, right, basic ECG, electrocardiographic theory says when you have a signal that moves away from or at an angle away from that positive electrode, you're going to have negative deflection. But what happens if it is a constant current? Then essentially what's going to happen is if you don't have any depolarization or repolarization, what's going to happen is, right, that current that's constantly moving away from the positive electrode is going to get shifted down. And then when you have depolarization and the beginning of repolarization, the baseline will temporarily be shifted back up, and then during resting potential, shifted down, and that is exactly what we're seeing here, all right? Or so the hypothesis goes, and as I've stated in other videos, it is a necessary component to understanding why we see ST segment elevation, but it's certainly not the full story. So hopefully this video helped fill in any gaps or help answer any questions or resolve any outstanding confusion that may be going on regarding the concept of ST elevation in the setting of transmural injury. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and hopefully you'll have a great weekend. Bye-bye.